For more on Apple's quarter, let's bring in Fast Money friend Gene Munster. He is also an Apple shareholder. Gene, what did you make of the quarter?
Melissa, there's some challenges that I wasn't anticipating. And as Tim said, that the street was widely aware that the China number was going to be soft. But if you factor in what happened in China and look at what happened in the rest of the world, that was a miss too. And so I was expecting the rest of the world to be up 4%. It was up about 1%. And I just kind of want to drill into that for one piece is I've been bullish on what Apple Intelligence could do back in September. My optimism has slowed slightly as the rollout has been slowed. But I have remained optimistic that Apple can beat their iPhone numbers based on this huge upgrade pool from 2021. That's the year where iPhone grew at 35%. And the December quarter is the first quarter where we start to see the real fruits of that upgrade cycle coming from a few years ago. And so I was expecting the rest of the world, even without Apple Intelligence, to kind of power this higher. So that was one piece that stuck out to me. And then I want to highlight something else that you said, Melissa, on this tariffs and potentially restricting Apple with a partner to do AI. To put it into perspective, Huawei's business it was up 15% in the quarter. And so Apple, China business, iPhone was probably down 12 to 13%. And so what that tells us is maybe it's because Huawei has the Cecilia assistant that is an AI assistant that's gaining traction. But there's also kind of a question of, is there a little bit of a shift in terms of how Chinese consumers are viewing these Western brands? If we put Samsung in the Western category, they struggled too. All of the other non-Chinese brands were down in the quarter. Some of those have AI assistants. And so that was the bad news. And Melissa, it's only fair for me to point out the good news because I'm a shareholder and I do believe where this company is going. Is Tim Cook said on the call that their active installed base was up, he gave the math, back into the math, was up 7% year over year to 2.35 billion active devices. That's impressive. I mean, to grow that number at that rate, it's testimony that despite any sort of variance in what's going on with the iPhone in any given quarter, the fabric of that flywheel and their customers remain loyal, which I think ultimately is going to be something that Apple investors are going to take some confidence into tonight as they think about these numbers.
You know, Gene, going into the numbers, there had been sort of a drumbeat of downward revisions, re-rating Apple lower. There's been a couple of downgrades, price targets being lowered, estimates being lowered, et cetera. And I'm just wondering if you think Apple, given the quarter that it just printed, like granted we don't have the guidance yet, maybe we should factor in a much slower iPhone trajectory in here. And so if we're going to say that iPhone growth is going to be, I don't know, 1% or whatever it is year on year from now on, what is that multiple that Apple is worth? And can services make up for that?
Well, I think just first on iPhone, expect that the iPhone guide is probably going to be below where the street's at for March, just given what they reported. And that kind of sets up iPhone for the full year. The street's looking for around 3% growth, for it probably to be kind of around that 1%. And then, like your point is, what's the right multiple on this when you put services into this? And at the end of the day, I still come back to this belief that this is a consumer staple company. We saw that active install base. This should have comfortably a multiple on the out year numbers. So that would be calendar 26, somewhere in the 25 to low 30s number. I mean, yeah, go back to what we've talked a lot in the past, the Coke, the Clorox, Procter & Gamble, those types of companies have those kind of multiples, even though they don't grow. I think Apple is that kind of staples company and does have upside to it relative to some of these things with Apple Intelligence. Apple Intelligence is going to have an impact. Steve Kovac reported that from Cook. It's going to have an impact. It's going to take longer than what I hoped, what a lot of people hoped. It's probably 26. But as you play this forward, think about the Apple investor now. We're seeing downward revisions to numbers. But then you start looking out over the next several quarters, you should start to see accelerating revenue growth off of that.